Hi, welcome back to PlanFirst Live, and I am Sean Larkin from PlanFirst Pinnacle Design. We're based in Auckland and we specialize in architectural, interior and landscaping design. Today we're going to be carrying on with our mini-series about whether one floor plan can work on different sites. So last week we took a look at the urban site, and today we're going to have a look at the mountain or sloping site. And we'll have a look at the opportunities and challenges of this particular type of site. And then also, can you use a generic plan or do you need to change it? So let's have a look. Firstly, what is a mountain or sloping site? And I think the name speaks for itself. So it's a site that has got a couple of things. Firstly, the land is steep. So the ground level changes significantly over the property. And a lot of the time, this is coupled with having a view. I think most people are very drawn to a view for good reason, and with that comes certain challenges. So oftentimes, if you are looking at mountainous sites, it does come with rocky ground. Access is normally difficult as well. Some of these images that we're going to look at are in remote locations. So often access is difficult, and normally there would not be municipal services available, which means that you'd have to very carefully look at your stormwater. You'd have to look at solar panels or some kind of system to get electricity to the house. Of course, gas would be one of the conveniences that you could use, and water, you need fresh drinking water as well. So all those things come accompanied, but we're going a little bit off topic now. Another challenge with building on a mountain site is you're very exposed to weather conditions. You've normally got quite a strong wind that'll come, from the valley up the side of the mountain. So these are all things to consider when either designing on a mountain or sloping site or deciding to actually buy one of these sites to build on. So what makes it a challenge to build on a sloping site? And look, not all mountain or sloping sites will have the same degree of slope, of course, but quite often what you will need to do in an instance like this is you'll have to build your house on different levels. Building it just flat on one level, you're going to have quite a lot of support that you'll need on the cantilever side. Your foundation design is going to be different. If you terrace it like they've seen it here, you're going to have lots of foundations, lots of retaining walls. Retaining walls are quite costly, but you want to make the most and maximize the view that you've got. Wind and exposure, of course, you need to look at. The drainage. Drainage is very important. You need to drain behind these retaining walls. You need to just make sure you get that water out. And then, of course, construction difficulty. It is very difficult or more difficult to build on a sloping site. So, of course, the biggest opportunity would be the view, without a doubt, and dramatic landscape. So you would want to orientate. You need to look at your orientation as well. But in an instance like this, you would most probably orientate towards the view, not always towards the sun. So you want to capture wide views, have lots of glass, and at the same time you want to feel connected to nature. So you would design with nature, not against it. And what I mean by that is you would have split levels or terraces, but looking at the opportunities, just create those private elevated living spaces. You still want it to be private, even though it is elevated and making the best of the views. In an instance like this, probably not that important because you don't really have neighbors around you. But if you were in an urban or suburban setting and you've got neighbors, of course, that would be quite an exposed living space. And you would definitely design for the view. So you would decide which views are the most important. Normally with these types of houses, you've got more than just your front view. You've normally got about a 270-degree view. So you've got lots of opportunity to have some really fantastic picture frame windows, for instance. All the rooms going all the way around this house will have beautiful views. So in effect, every single habitable space will have a view, which is really fantastic if you are lucky enough to be able to build on a sloping site and have a view like this. Have a look carefully at the window placement again to make the most of the views. Privacy, just have a look at that and avoid overexposure. So, you know, you do still want to have some private space. And you would also want to design for the elements, being the wind, the rain, and the sun. So the challenges, of course, is the foundations, the access, and not just the access for the occupants of the home, but also access for construction. You know, normally you would need to get a crane in there sometimes, and that is very difficult on some sites. Foundations will be more complex. Retaining walls, inevitable. So lots of difficult driveways, lots of earthworks. Drainage needs to be designed in before construction starts, and that is imperative because with building on a slope, you will have a portion of your house which is backing straight onto the soil behind it, and you need to drain that and waterproof that extremely well. Otherwise, you will forever have a problem. To try and fix a waterproofing issue after the fact is difficult. And obviously, with all these things that I've mentioned comes a higher construction cost. So just factor all these things in. Another important thing is your site accessing from the bottom of the hill or from the top of the hill? And that makes a big difference to the design as well. So your garages clearly need to be, except in this instance, which is a topic all on its own, but you would ideally want your garages to be as close as possible to the road access. If you try and just place a generic plan onto a sloping site, you can see the extensive amount of excavation and just soil build-up that this house has had to do. So it's very awkward. I almost want to say unstable. It's got very poor entry. I mean, this was not planned properly at all. If you're going up to the driveway, there's no turning circle, so there's nowhere for you to turn around. So you would really have to reverse down that driveway just to get back to the street. So think about these things before you start building and before you actually lock your design into place. Very expensive retaining walls here. And I would say poorly connected to the land. You know, you've got this house up on a pedestal. It could have been handled in a much more softer or, you know, it could have been handled a lot differently. Split levels are great for a sloping site. So work with split levels. There's nothing wrong. There's no rule book that says floors and stories have to be one on top of the other. Work with what you've got, slope it or step the house down as the slope allows. Then you must ask yourself a few questions before you start designing. So is the access at the top of the site and you're going to be working down, or is the access at the bottom of the site and you're going to be working up? I would suggest try and have your garages on the same level as the road as far as possible. How steep is the site? That's another thing you must ask. Sometimes you get extremely steep sites, and sometimes they're almost unbuildable, and it does just take so much financial resource to build on that site that it almost is not worth it. So look carefully at that. See where the best views are. Make sure if you have got really good views, don't position things like service areas and garages where there is a magnificent view. Keep that for your living spaces and your bedrooms. And also, when you are looking at your driveway, just remember that you want your driveway to be no more at the absolute max of a 1 in 8 if possible. So you don't want it too steep, and keep in mind that turning circle at the top. Cars must be able to actually drive down the hill and up the hill. Water flow, and water will naturally flow in a certain direction or in a certain path. So make sure you research that properly and you address it accordingly. So you're either going to have drainage channels, or you're going to have sufficient drainage behind the retaining walls. You can allow the water through the retaining wall if it is stone. So those things need to be managed very carefully and designed by an engineer. And of course, your outdoor living space. You would want outdoor living space because you want to make use of the views. I mean, that is, after all, why you're building in such a beautiful setting. Then, of course, just have a look at the slope of the site, which way it's coming from. I personally think, accessing the site from the top is better than accessing it from the bottom, because you want your living areas actually to be at the top so that they make the most of the views. And if your garages can come in on that living area, it just makes for a much easier transition from your garage into your house. If you are coming in from the bottom and you've got your living rooms elevated, you might have to go up 3 flights of stairs with all your groceries just to get to the kitchen. So these are all practical things that are a reality, and one doesn't always think about that because you get so swept away by the beauty of the view and wanting to make the best of that one sometimes forgets the practical things. And then step your design with the land. Here they've used terraces quite successfully. And the reason for that is because they've got the fire pit at the bottom, which I quite like because it just takes you away from the actual busyness of the house. And if you're sitting in the evening at that fire pit, you may as well be sitting just serenely in nature. You don't always want the actual house structure around you. You sometimes want to be a little bit closer to nature. So use the split levels. They've made use of it by putting a bit of a waterfall in, which is great. Water goes a long way in any instance. It also reduces your excavations. It's following the natural contours of the land, but just making that garden space a little bit more yours than it would be if it was just, natural bush. And then, just breaking the house into levels. Very important. Right, cut and fill. So you always try and do, if possible, a 50-50 cut and fill. So what that means is that if you have a slope, you ideally want your base level of your house to be in the center of that, so that whatever soil you remove to cut into the mountain, you will use at the bottom to build that platform up. That is the most economical way to design on a slope, to create your flat platforms. But again, try not to have too much of a flat platform unless you have got maybe elderly people that are staying there and they specifically don't want stairs. but then try not to build on a slope that is excessive, because moving large amounts of soil is difficult, and getting access the soil moving equipment to get that in here is also not easy always. Then retaining walls. So you won't get away with not having retaining walls if you're building on a mountain or a slope. And of course, here we see an image of a house which is in suburbia. So not all these houses are built out in nature. You're going to have retaining walls regardless. So try and minimize the amount of retaining wall that you do have. Garage access has to be at street level. There's no way around that. And of course, you want to try and build as high as you can on your site so that you maximize your view. So carefully look at that. Make sure also, I always would say to my clients, make sure you've got enough guest parking as well, because it's one thing to provide a parking garage for yourself, but when you do have guests, where are they going to park? So I think a better solution here would possibly have been to just flatten this area where the stairs are, so that you could park an additional 2 cars there, and then just rearrange your staircase going up. I mean, it's quite easy to do that on paper before you start building. And of course, when you do build on a slope, you need to protect that slope because gravity is always there. Then the foundations and structure. Same house, if we go back, they had a retaining wall which is being utilized for their swimming pool. In the next image, no swimming pool. They've just terraced it down and made that their garden space. So, you know, your patio is your usable space, but at least you do have a bit of greenery that softens, and you don't have one flat plane of retaining wall. So nicely stepped, quite well designed, I think. And it also does help, the vegetation does help with the wind. If you do have gusts of wind coming up from the street level, that just breaks the wind a little bit. But of course, you will always have engineering input, and very, very good engineering design is needed when you're building on a site. And again, the drainage is very important. Access and driveway we have touched on. Make sure your driveway gradient is sufficient. And there's various ways of doing that. If you've got enough space, you can just, wind your way up the hill. If you don't, you need to carefully assess it, and you might need to have your garages on a lower level so that your driveway is not too steep. Ensure vehicle tuning space at the top, and pedestrians need access as well. So it's not just the garages. Make sure that they have got staircase going up to the front door, and it needs to be safe. Those stairs need to be non-slip because there is occasionally rain, there could be ice, snow, and just make sure that there is sufficient construction access. Then your entrance. I like a real statement entrance, normally next to the living areas. So that needs to be carefully considered as well. There will be some kind of approach entering the main entrance. You can use that main entrance as we have here to look directly at the view on the other side. It makes quite a bold statement, and it's been resolved pretty well. So they've still respected the land, and they've terraced the gardens down and then just put some stairs going to the front door. You could use a bridge as well if you have got a different type of site. Then outdoor living on a slope. It does give you the ability to have multiple different areas. This house has been resolved very well. So you've got your entertainment area on the same level as your living, which is great. But then they've created a secondary entertainment space. It is a bit of a retreat space lower down, and they've got the stone wall to protect them from the wind. So you wouldn't have a view from that space, but you've got the viewing deck in the front. So depending on the weather, if it's good weather, you could sit on the patio, you could sit on the viewing deck. But if it is quite a windy day, you would and you want to be outside, you would either use the sheltered area, or they've even got a fire pit, which would then also be pretty exposed. But it's very site dependent. So if you are in a reasonably windy area, you would just design for the wind. And you can also, of course, make use of the garden area. But you'll see in this instance, they've actually got their living area running, or not parallel, running on the same level as the contours. So they haven't worked against the site, they've worked with the site. Wind and weather, again, if you've got a lot of wind in that area, you would have a conservancy type. You could have it openable, but at least you can use that space when the weather isn't great. Or if it's raining, if there is harsh sun, there's ways of dealing with that as well. And then on the other side of the house, they've got the alfresco dining area, which is quite nicely sheltered with stone walls. And then they've got glass panels on the side. I suspect this house is in a reasonably windy area. So they've resolved that quite well. They're still making use of the views, but they've got enough living space that they have got options. Drainage. One of the most important things in any house design is your drainage. If you get a heavy downpour, especially on a mountainous or sloping site, that water can do a lot of damage. So if you've got a paved area, you know, I mean, if you've got natural vegetation, it doesn't really matter because it seeps into the ground. But if you do have a driveway like we have here, you would want to, at intervals, put drainage channels in to catch that water, because if you don't, you're going to start getting erosion. And it's going to start affecting the fence that they've got, the retaining fence that they've got. And even behind the retaining walls, make sure that you drain those properly. You can either put pipes through the wall, or you can let it drain through the wall, but just make sure you've got your membranes and your permeable pipes behind the retaining walls. So if we look at that typical 250 square meter, which this clearly is not, we just used that as a base point. But if we look at a typical floor plan that somebody likes their friend's floor plan, or they've seen something online that they like, you need to have a look. Does it fit onto the slope? Firstly, how steep is that site? Is it practical to have the floor plan as is? Where's the garage positioned? Is it at the top? Is it at the bottom? Is the floor plan capturing the views? Are you going to need excessive earthworks? Is it going to be an affordable build? You might be overcapitalizing. The image in the right-hand bottom corner shows how you would step it down with the site. So just have multiple levels. I would say take the floor plan that you've got. You can break it up into zones. Floor plans always have the private zones, the public zones. So break it up into the zones and have your different zones on the different levels. Yes, so you might have to change floor levels. You might have to change garage location, because sometimes your view is in front of you and sometimes your garage is behind you. Sometimes it's in front of you. Every single site and every single plan is specific. Have a look at window placements to maximize views again. Roof shape is interesting because you want to, especially if you are building in the countryside, you would want to actually try and keep it as flat as possible so you are merging into the landscape. Even if you are building in an urban setting, think of the neighbor at the back. They want a view as much as you want the view, and whether you've got a pitched roof or a flat roof is not really going to affect you when you are inside that space. So try and just be considerate to the guy behind you and letting him have a bit of a view as well. Then successful sloping site strategies. Now, a lot of the houses that we've looked at today have been quite large houses, but the principles apply whether it's a large house or whether it's a small house. Maybe just a bit of an easier process if it's a smaller house. Your split levels, step in your building forms, elevate your decks, have multiple decks. Driveway design, in this instance, no turning circle again, and you do see this quite often. It makes it difficult for the homeowner to reverse out. You know, rather steal a little bit of garden space at the top of the driveway and have enough space even for visitors parking. But just make it as comfortable as possible to enter and exit from a vehicle point of view. Your foundations, of course, I think it goes without saying, foundations, retaining walls, drainage, probably the three most important structural aspects that you need to look at. Shelter your outdoor areas. I would say try and make those shelter elements movable or flexible, because if it is a nice day, you want to be able to open it up. Have a retractable roof if you can. Have bifold doors, sliding doors that can move out the way so that you can take advantage of great weather. And then, respond to the slope, capture the views, feel grounded in the landscape. So really try and have that cut and fill as close as possible to a 50-50. Safety always comes first, so provide your safe access, manage the weather and the wind, and avoid unnecessary earthworks. If you can build up with natural ground, do that. You don't have to have terraces everywhere. Have as much as what you feel comfortable with. Avoid unnecessary earthworks. And make sure your outdoor space is usable, because it's pointless building this fantastic, fabulous house in the most beautiful setting, but you can never sit outside because it's miserable. So just be thoughtful of that, and make sure you're comfortable and not overexposed. So just in closing, I think I've said this a few times already, just have a look at what the plan needs to respond to. And I would say, I almost want to say 99.9%, because it's never 100%. Nothing's ever 100%. 99% of the time you will need to change the plan, guaranteed. And do so with thought. Put thought into it and see what is the best possible way to change that plan. Portions can stay the same. If there's a portion of the plan that your client really likes, or that you really like if you're the homeowner watching, tell the designer what your non-negotiables are so that they can work within those parameters. And then just the final takeaway, work with the land that you've got, not against it. So respond to the slope, respond to your environment, make it practical. Consider your structure very carefully for the engineers. Make the most of the views. Always go to site if you are in the vicinity and you're designing. If it's not possible for you to go to the site, make sure that you've got enough footage. Go to Google Earth, get the client to do a Matterport so that you can see exactly where the views are, where the problem areas are, and design according to that. Always first prize to actually go to site and experience the space. You'll get the best results. And then next week, we will be having a look at the mini-series part 4, which is going to be designing on a beach or coastal site. So each week, we're just going through these 5 site typologies. And yeah, next week, we're halfway through the series, and that'll be all about beach and coastal sites. There are my details. If you would like to contact me, you're more than welcome anytime to drop me a line or give me a call. If you've got a specific project that you need assistance with, you are welcome to reach out as well. And thank you for watching. We will be back again next week.